Hi, I'm Cindy with 3 Gothic horror mashups and welcome to my channel. So last week was Mother's Day, so this is my Mother's Day recommendation. I wanted to do this video before the holiday, but it just didn't work out that way because we had some illness in my family and I wasn't able to record the video in time. I wouldn't have had time to edit it, so I had to wait until this week, so I apologize for that. But anyway, so I have, I think, about 25 books I want to recommend you. These books all have to do with mothers and motherhood. So go ahead and stick around if that sounds interesting to you. So first I'm going to talk about a manga series. I actually have not read this manga, but I have seen the anime, and this is called Full Metal Alchemist. And this isn't largely about motherhood, but the inciting incident that happens to these boys does have to do with their mother. So these boys, their father has been absent their entire lives, and so it's only been them and their mother. But unfortunately, their mother ends up passing away. And in this world, because this is like a dual history type of story, and so in this world, alchemy is like a real thing where it's almost like magic, like it's science, but it's, fantastical or whatever. And so these boys learn how to do alchemy so that they can try to bring their mother back from the dead, which obviously is taboo and you're not supposed to do that, but they do it anyways, and it has dire consequences. And so what they bring back is not their mother. She's something else, something horrific and monstrous. But these boys now have to deal with the consequences because something from the other side has asked for payment for this attempt to bring back their mother. And so in the process of trying to bring their mother back, one of the boys lost his arm and his leg, and then the other boy lost his entire body. But his brother, knowing that his brother was being taken, he did like a alchemical spell, and he actually got his spirit attached to a suit of armor that was sitting in the attic where they performed their ritual. And so now his brother is just a soul inside of this hunk of metal, and he now has to have a mechanical arm and leg because his arms and legs got taken as repayment for this spell that they did, or this ritual I should say, that didn't even end up working because they didn't get their mom back. And so now the rest of the series is about this brother who feels incredibly guilty, and he's going to become a state alchemist in the hopes of finding a way to get his brother's body back to him so that he's not just a soul attached to a suit of armor. So fantastic story. Absolutely one of my favorites. Highly recommend it. And then we have The Perfect Mother by Amy Malloy. And this is a thriller about this woman who finds this group of mothers. She kind of wants to be part of their friend group or whatever, and starts to get in good with them. But they go to like a park one day, I think it is, and her kid ends up being kidnapped from a stroller. So this is a kidnapping story, which is, a parent's worst nightmare is either the death of a child or the kidnapping of a child, which usually results in death anyways, but just horrific. Like, I can't even imagine. Like, it terrifies me to even contemplate. Another one is The Couple Next Door by Sherry Lapina. This is another kidnapping story. So kind of this similar premise where this couple goes next door to this party and they brought their kid along, but he's just like sitting in the stroller or whatever. But when they come back downstairs to go home, their kid's no longer there. So somebody has taken them. And then I have one more kidnapping story to share, and that is Where are the Children by Mary Higgins Clark. And this is an oldie but a goodie. Mary Higgins Clark, I don't even know if she writes anymore, but she's very prolific in the suspense genre. But anyways, I'm sure you've heard of her. So this is a kidnapping story about this poor mother who actually had 2 children who passed away, which again, horrific, and she's trying to put it behind her, put it in the past, and she goes through all this depression and different things, and she ends up marrying somebody else and dyeing her hair and just trying to start life over again. And she ends up having children with this new man, and life seems good again. But one day her children are playing in the backyard, and when she glances out the window, all of a sudden they're not there anymore. They have been kidnapped. So this poor mother that has to deal with the death of her 2 first children, and then her second 2 children get kidnapped. Like, That is absolutely terrifying. And then sticking with Mary Higgins Clark, I have a few more from her. We have The Cradle Will Fall, and this is about couples that are trying to become pregnant, so they're going through like IVF or adoption and different things. And so this woman, she is trying to get pregnant, and I think she does actually end up pregnant, but then she ends up killed. And so they're trying to decide if it was her, if it was the pregnancy, and then there's something very off about some of these other couples that have been going through this IVF program. And so our detective was trying to figure out what's going on in this situation. But I really enjoyed this one a lot. I thought it was a good time. And then we have A Cry in the Night. This is my favorite Mary Higgins Clark book of all time. I've reread it several times and I love it. And this is about a woman who has two young girls, and she has like this whirlwind romance with this man who whisks away to his farm. I think it's in Minnesota or maybe Montana. I don't remember. Doesn't matter. But anyway, so she gets whisked away to this isolated farm. And at first, he seems like the perfect man and like he's going to be such a good dad. But then very quickly, he kind of becomes controlling and like the children are too loud and too messy and, whatever else. And so it's not technically about motherhood that much. Like that's just like a side story of it kind of. But at the same time, it does have themes of motherhood, and there is a triggering event with a kid. But I love this one, and I cannot stop recommending it because it's absolutely phenomenal. And then we have Remember Me. And this is about a woman who had a mental breakdown, and so now her husband worries that she's not really capable of being a mother. Like he's afraid that she's going to harm their child. And so he's always finding ways of like, oh, why don't you take him to daycare? Oh, I hired this nanny to just help you out, because she's a writer and she's trying to come out with her new book and the series that's very famous. And so he makes it seem like he's doing it for her, Oh, you need time to write, just let this other woman be with him, but she knows very well what he's doing, and she has a hard time thinking that maybe she isn't safe to be around her son, and maybe she is headed for another mental breakdown. But this is probably my second favorite Mary Higgins Clark book that I've read. I absolutely love it. I've read this probably 2 or 3 times. And then we have The Other Mothers. And this is similar to the Perfect Mother, where you have this woman who's a new mother and she's trying to get in good with these other mothers, So she's a journalist, and there was a nanny that ended up being killed. And so she wants to investigate that, but she's also a new mother, and she's trying to, form play dates and get in with these other moms that can maybe help her figure out this whole motherhood thing. But one of the mothers in this group of other mothers ends up murdered as well. And so now it's turned into more of a, the journalistic side is going to take part, and she's going to try and figure out what is going on with people killing nannies and mothers. And then we have Ghost Mother, and this is a horror book, and it's a haunted house book. So if you can, tell from the title. But anyway, so this is about a woman who desperately wants to be pregnant and wants to have a child, but she's having a hard time getting pregnant. And so her husband suggests that they move somewhere else just to start over. I think he gets a job in Chicago or something. Let's see. Oh, they're moving from Chicago to a small town in Wisconsin. And so our main character, she falls in love with this decrepit Victorian house, of course. And so the husband, trying to make her feel better about not being able to have kids, goes ahead and buys this house because she's just enamored with it, and she's convinced that this is where she's going to get pregnant and where she's going to have her kids. And so they move in, but then soon after she realizes that maybe this house is haunted. So I haven't read this one yet, but I'm super, super excited to get to it. And then we have Do What Godmother Says. And I'm a little bit confused by the title because when you read the premise, it talks about a grandmother, not a godmother. So that must be part of the mystery that she's trying to figure out. But anyway, so this is about a girl who is kind of down on her luck. She lost her job and she's kind of aimless. She doesn't know what to do with herself. And she's going through her grandmother's things in her attic one day, and she stumbles upon a painting. And she loves this painting. She just thinks it's amazing. And so her grandmother's like, well, go ahead and just take it. You can have it, But this ends up causing issues and problems down the road. So that's really all I can say about it. But if you can't tell, I have not read this book either. So I don't know how the godmother comes into play. But it's somehow connected to this painting. And then we have Mother Dear by Ivy Tholen, and this one sounds like a wacky good time. I haven't read this one either, but we have this woman who it sounds like she's very close with her mother, and it sounds like they killed together. And so she's like, oh, my mom, she's so critical, except when we're killing together or something. But she also has a younger sister, and her younger sister is getting married, and she starts to feel left out, because weddings take a lot of time and effort and attention away. And so she's starting to be like, well, I'm the one that murders with you, Mother. Why aren't you paying attention to me? And she kind of has a hard time with all the attention that her sister is getting from Mother Dear. And then we have My Darling Girl by Jennifer McMahon. And this was not a favorite of mine, I'll admit. I thought it was just okay. I've read better by this author, but it is to do with motherhood. So we have this woman who, her mother has been very hard on her and verbally abusive and critical and just not a good mother. But now she's old and she's, starting to have dementia and can't take care of herself and having, physical problems as you do as you age. And so she kind of feels obligated to take care of her because it is her mom at the end of the day, even though they don't get along. And so, against her husband's better judgment, she decides to allow her mother to come live with them rather than put her in a home. And so, obviously, that turns out not to be a good idea. And then we have Dearest, and this one's kind of similar because you have this woman who doesn't get along with her mother, and her mother's not a very good mom. But she is a new mother herself. She has a brand new little baby. And as anybody who has had newborns knows, it's a lot of work and it's overwhelming and you're tired, and so she doesn't know how to navigate this new motherhood. It doesn't sound like there's a man in the picture. And so despite not getting along with her mother, she invites her mother to come stay with her to help with the baby. But as soon as her mother moves in, different things start to happen that she kind of regrets having her mother here, because apparently her mother has secrets that she didn't know about, and those secrets are wreaking havoc with her presence. So speaking of not the best of mothers, we have Psycho. So I'm not really gonna tell you what this is about because I'm sure you already know, but suffice it to say that you have a mother that's not a very good mother, but she also has a son that's a little psycho. So I'm sure you've seen the old Alfred Hitchcock movie, but this is just a tiny little novella, which kind of surprised me actually when I found out. I don't think I really need to say much else about this. I'm sure you've seen it around. And then we have The House of My Mother. I just barely read this in the last month and it was very sad. So you have a narcissistic mother who in this day and age discovers, being an influencer and having a family blog, and it ends up not being good for this little family. And she actually has a therapist that becomes part of her life who ends up making things even worse than they were. She's not a good therapist. And these two women become very abusive to this family. But on the internet, everything looks perfect and idyllic and everybody thinks, oh, this cute little family. But behind closed doors, that was not the case. And then we have some classics. So we have The Prince of Tides. And I read this in college and it was such a heartbreaking, depressing read, but really fascinating, really interesting. And I really enjoyed it. But we have this main character who later on in life, he realizes how screwed up and messed up his childhood was. And so he's going to therapy to kind of deal with the trauma that happened to him in his childhood. And so you have a lot of flashbacks to when he was a child. And yeah, his parents are not great, including his mother. Terrible, terrible parents. And then we have The Day of the Door by Laurel Hightower. And again, this is about a mother who's very abusive and her kids are not safe in this house. And one day, one of the kids gets taken behind closed doors with the mother and he never comes back out alive. And so they are obviously convinced that their mother had murdered their brother. But she swears up and down that she didn't do it, that there was a demon in the house and the demon was responsible for killing the kid. So I haven't read this one yet, so we'll see whether it's a supernatural explanation or whether she's just a despicable mother. But either way, she's not good. But, I don't know if she's actually the one that murdered her child, but I hear really good things about this one. And then we have the infamous Flowers in the Attic by V.C. Andrews. And again, such a sad, sad book, but a very good book. but also very messed up. And the mother and the grandmother in this book are just despicable, despicable people. But you have this cute little family who were just normal, but then the dad passes away. And so the mom, she doesn't have a job, she doesn't have money, she can't take care of all these kids. And so they end up moving in with the grandparents. But the grandparents are not nice people and they don't like children. And so the mom's like, okay, well, just stay up in this attic for just a little while. I'm going to talk to them because her parents are rich. And she's like, I'm just trying to get some money for us because we can't make it on our own. So just give me a few weeks, just stay up here, be quiet, be nice, and I'll try and convince my parents to give us some money or convince them to let us stay or whatever. But those couple of weeks stretch on and on with the mom giving all these promises, we're going to leave soon, we're going to leave soon. But instead, she is neglecting her children and living the high life and pretending she's single. And these poor kids just get trapped in this attic for years. And it's so, so sad. And then some more classics. We have The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I'm sure you've read this in high school. I know I did. And this wasn't my favorite, but I was in high school, and so I really need to reread it and see what my feelings are as an adult. But yeah, at the time, it was just like, oh, I have to read it for school. But you have this woman who was living during Puritan times, and she gets pregnant out of wedlock, which is like a big no-no, and so she's trying to navigate life as a single mother in a time period and in a community that shuns you for that. And so they make her wear this big A on her clothes, A for adultery. And so, people scorn her and are mean to her because she has this child out of wedlock. And then, of course, we have Rosemary's Baby, because how could you not think of this book? So again, I'm sure I don't need to really tell you what this book is about, but we have this woman and her husband who move into this swanky new apartment, and he's an actor, and so he's gone a lot, but she gets pregnant, and it goes through her pregnancy during the 60s, and eerie and creepy things start to happen in this apartment, and she starts to feel like maybe there's somebody trying to harm her baby, and she's, afraid being there by herself all the time. And it has a crazy, crazy ending, which I hope hasn't been spoiled for you because it's, it's pretty nuts, but in the best way possible. And then I have some books that are a lot similar to Rosemary's Baby. So we have No Child of Mine. I haven't read this one yet, but it just reminds me of Rosemary's Baby. It gives me those vibes. But this is about a woman who is also pregnant, and they move into this cute little house, but as soon as they move in, her husband starts to change, and he spends a lot of time in the attic, and she starts to feel unsafe around him and fears, for her baby's life. And we have Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. I really enjoyed this one. The ending wasn't really my favorite, but the rest of the book I thought was really, really good. So this is about a woman who, instead of being pregnant at the time, like Rosemary's Baby, she's pregnant like the entire book. And this one, she's already had the baby, but there was complications to do with the birth, and it left her paralyzed. And so she's pretty resentful towards her child, and she's going through like postpartum depression and all that. But they move into this new apartment, and again, creepy and eerie things begin to happen as soon as they move in. And I love the atmosphere. I love the vibes. It was a lot of fun. And then we have Delicate Condition. I actually just barely read this, so if you watch my wrap up for this month, I will be talking about this book, but it did give me Rosemary's Baby vibes. It was pretty much a retelling of Rosemary's Baby, but like modernized. So we have this woman who's going through IVF and all the strain and the stress that comes with that. And then she finally gets pregnant, but then she thinks that she miscarried, and she's so upset. She's tried for years to have this baby, and to just miscarry it is just devastating. But then all of a sudden she starts feeling kicking in her stomach, and she's like, wait a minute, I thought I had a miscarriage. And so now she's like, wait, mate, am I still pregnant? And so she goes to the doctor, and they're like, yes, you are still pregnant. And so she's like, what? And so, but there's a lot of weird things that come along with this pregnancy. Like, she'll see a dead raccoon and want to eat it. And she's like, well, I've heard of pregnancy cravings. That seems a little bit odd, but maybe. Like just different weird things start to happen that she's like, is this pain normal? Are these cravings normal? I'm not sure. But, she's wanted to be a mother for so long that even if she is carrying a potential monster, she doesn't really care. But anyways, I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was good, but if you want to know actual other thoughts about it, you'll have to wait for the wrap up. And there you have it. That's all the books I have about motherhood and about raising kids, which is fun and crazy and hard and devastating and all these different ways. You know, people that have to deal with IVF, people that deal with miscarriage, people that have to, you know, motherhood its own, even if everything goes swimmingly well, is still hard and difficult, and but also like awesome and amazing, and you do a lot of growth. And you know, and so it doesn't surprise me that there's so many books of dealing with motherhood and pregnancy and different things, because it really is so human, first of all, because, you know, it's something that most people go through. And so we can all relate to it. Not all, but, you know, a lot of us can relate to it. But there's also, you know, so much like devastation and pain and confusion and everything that comes with it. So there's a lot of, you know, things to talk about when it comes to these topics. But anyways, I'm sure most of these books are not new to you, especially since most of them seem to be classics. But I hope maybe you found a couple that you hadn't heard of, or that you maybe want to bump up on your TBR. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a like and let me know. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I post every Friday, and I hope to see you in the next one. See ya.